Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this third BISA seminar on COVID-19 and strategies post the virus. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome Douglas Kruger. Douglas is on your screen, Fred Klinkenberg, and Amanda Wilde. I will introduce the three participants. We'll allow them a little bit of time each to speak about their various expertise. I'll do that introduction to you in a little bit more detail. Welcome to Amanda, and we will allow some time at the end at approximately 25 to 22 some questions from the delegates or the participants, panelists who might feel that they have other things to ask about. So welcome to everybody. My name is Mark Peters. I'm a committee member of BISA Johannesburg, and I have been asked to be your host and panelist for this afternoon. First up, I welcome Douglas. Douglas, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Douglas has been the recent author of a book that we felt was very relevant to this. Douglas, we're going to give you an opportunity to tell everybody about the book. But tell us a little bit about how fast you wrote this book. What was the motivators? Why did you get involved? Most people would say that getting into being an author, you have rocks in your head. Tell us a little bit about how you got going on that.
And Mark, I wouldn't disagree with them. I think they're right.
Yeah. I've had that experience, yes.
Yeah. It was the most extraordinary thing. I've written 8 previous business books with Penguin, which was the, shall we say, the setup to the story. And as the crisis hit, and just a few days prior to lockdown in South Africa, I received an email from the business editor at Penguin asking this very sort of cautiously worded question, which was, are you in the market to write a book on small business survival? And then it went on to say, but here's the catch. You need to do it in something like 10 days flat.
I heard that, I heard it.
Possible. We're asking for a miracle, but we're asking anyway. And I took a deep breath, I said a prayer, and before I had enough time to really think about it, I responded with a yes. And we got the book done in 1 week flat, from a Wednesday to a Wednesday. And the remarkable thing with this particular one is they then offered it to Penguin internationally, and it was accepted and published all around the world. So an unusual story and a whirlwind scenario. I'm still sort of assuming I'm going to wake any moment now and realize that it was all just a dream. But it's done and it's out there, and hopefully it's doing some good.
Okay. Tell us a bit about some of the themes of it. And then I think everybody who's listening today wants to know, did you get paid yet? Because then the dream has become reality, yeah?
Yeah. Mark, it's actually a very good question, because I work as a combination business author and speaker, and the speaking industry is dead. It's gone for a time at least. Which in fact is why the book is actually dedicated to my peers in the speaking industry, with an inscription that says, you know, kind of keep your heads up there, the crowds will gather again. I have not been paid, but the theory is it is selling all around the world. It's now available as an ebook where countries are in lockdown. It's going to print where they can, and it's an audiobook as well. So in theory, it should sell in significant numbers, but no, haven't seen a paycheck yet.
Yeah. We all know that feeling, eh? Unless you've got the regular salary, and even that is looking a bit dicey.
Yeah, marry someone rich if you can, but that's not
Yeah, but as you say, you're using it. You're using the book. A lot of academics do that. You're using the book as a front runner to your speaking engagement. Hopefully later. What's your advice to those listening on this webinar? Give us 2 or 3 things that you think we should be doing as South African businesses or Irish businesses in South Africa. What should we be doing?
All right, so in the book, I give 50 ways, which is really an amalgamation of just different ideas that you can try. All of them, however, rely on a simple equation that has 2 parts. And it essentially says all business survival equals profitability over costs. So if you're feeling flustered, that's the equation to keep at front of mind. You've got to keep your profitability above your costs. Now, I think what's happening is that a lot of businesses are focusing exclusively on the second part of that equation, which is to say they are conserving. Now, while that is important, it's also entirely possible to conserve your way into obsolescence, into the grave. You do have to look at the cash flow part. That is critically important. Now, of course, that presents unique challenges. How on earth do you do that? And the book attempts to answer it. One of the ways in which we answer that question, and it's the one that I think I've seen since writing the book, the one that I've seen in the real world having the most success, has got to be the voucher system, which is buy in lieu of. If you purchase now, we will deliver when. And I find what's wonderful is that a lot of the communities are simply looking for ways to help entrepreneurs. Two practical examples of this. In my neighborhood, we have a gentleman who drives a grooming van for pets. He cannot operate in our neighborhood right now, but people are able to buy vouchers with an entrepreneur like that, and they are wonderfully and uniquely generous in terms of how willing they are to do that. So that entails cash flow. Bigger version of the same story. We saw on SABC News a couple of nights ago, a winery selling these vouchers for international purchases. And the person was saying that he gets the sense from his international customers who are buying from him that they're never even going to bother to redeem the purchase. They're simply looking for ways to keep people going, which is absolutely wonderful.
I've got something, sorry.
Yeah, myself
Doug,
as well.
tell me, apologies. Yeah, I got something popping up there in front of me. Doug, do you think, well, let me phrase this question, and it wasn't on our original list, but it's based on your question. How long do you think South African companies can continue, and I'll ask Amanda to think about this as well, how long can South African companies keep going if they don't grow?
Yeah.
So the growth thing without so let's assume they're taking cost out of the system. How long can they keep continuing if there's no growth? Because that's the expectation.
Mark, I think if you switch off an economy entirely, the answer is terrifyingly short span of time, really. And we do need to see an easing of just about everything right now, because you are weighing two kinds of human crisis against one another. You're weighing up the deaths from COVID on the one hand versus deaths from starvation on the other hand. And, you know, starvation has a 100% death rate. So in South Africa, we have something in the region about, I believe it's about 25 people dependent on every single tax-paying individual. You take one person out of employment, you're creating this massive knock-on effect among a community of people. So, you know, it's a very serious situation. And the answer is not very long. The best we can do right now is online business and to an extent delivery. And the organizations that can do that will at least survive a little longer. But yes, it's very serious.
And do you think a lot of people that you deal with, Doug, will do that? I mean, there was an insert on one of the news stations last night that said a lot of restaurants wouldn't do it because it was too expensive to get their bigger kitchens going. So smaller takeaway, I can get smaller restaurants, family owned.
Is it worth your while? Struggle, eh? Yeah. And you know, it's interesting, Mark, a lot of things that you wouldn't assume could be digitized actually can. Taking a sort of a location dependent business concern, like say a gym, for example, you would think that this would utterly knock out the gym industry. And yet there are ways in which the core value, the core thing can be taken online. I was amazed the other day to see a bodybuilding video, gentleman from the UK who's guiding people in terms of how to do bodybuilding workouts at home. And his video from last week had something like 25 million views. Now, it's the same core thing. And if you have monetized a YouTube channel, 25 million views is an annual income. It is significant amounts of money. So even if you are location dependent, there may nevertheless be clever ways around it. It really just takes a bit of lateral thinking.
Yeah, thank you. And anything else, Doug, that you think would be useful? I mean, one of the questions that we were asked, and I think we passed on to you, is in your book, do you speak about how do we keep staff utilized and motivated? I think that's a big issue. One is staff on board, that's one thing, but whether they're motivated to keep going. Any thoughts on that? And Amanda, again, and Fred, given the company that you work with, I'd love to hear your views on that as well.
Quite a number of thoughts, Mark, and there are, I think, at least 15 chapters in the book about that very topic. To the great credit of entrepreneurs in South Africa and all around the world, that is probably the leading concern right now, is how to keep your staff gainfully employed. The core thought is this one. Economist Thomas Sowell points out that in many places where a minimum wage has been brought into a nation, it has actually done great damage to the poorest of the poor. South Africa has a very high poverty rate. The principle becomes this: if you are able to pay a little rather than nothing, please, for heaven's sake, do. That keeps people alive, and it keeps people alive in a radius, in a community. So it might entail, for example, cycling staff. If you are really forced to lay off half of your staff, rather than do that, could you have half of them work for 2 weeks, half of them work for another 2 weeks, and so forth? There are clever ways of doing this. There are also proactive ways of doing it. For example, can you develop an online tip jar? If you order work via online sources like Upwork.com or Fiverr.com, you will find that there is a standard work fee plus a little digital tip jar. Simply making it available can be enough to bring in something, and right now, something is better than nothing.
Yeah, better than nothing. Agree. Thank you, Douglas. I've enjoyed that, and please stay on the line. And we did post for the listeners and viewers. We did post your web address for further information on the book. And over to you, The Rose Among the Thorns. It wouldn't be too difficult with these chaps, but it's nice to have you here, Amanda, and great that you could get on video. Amanda, welcome. Amanda Wilde, as is the managing director of Umsinsi. Have I got that right? Healthcare. Amanda, you'll correct me on that with the healthcare. Welcome to you, Amanda, and thank you. And I wanted you to give us a little bit of your experience of trying to run a business like your healthcare business in such difficult times. And are you locked down, or did you get special permission to be out and about? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you're coping under these difficult circumstances.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for the invitation as well. It's Umsinsi, it's the coral tree. So if anyone's used to the beautiful lucky bean tree, the coral tree that we see usually coming out to flower from July through September, it's my favourite tree. So I think when you set up your own business, you're lucky enough to be able to give it a name that really means something to you. I moved from UK, it'll be 13 years actually this coming Christmas. Left UK on my 40th birthday just before, and they do
you
say,
don't need to tell us that, Amanda.
Life begins at 40. and it really has flown. So we've been operating, Mark, throughout since the lockdown, because being a healthcare business, we're part of essential services. We're particularly focused on several aspects that are relevant at the moment, but it's been quite a challenge actually. And if we look at speaking to a lot of our colleagues who are out there in what we would normally call our competitor companies, what we've really seen is a paralysis in the health sector. We've not seen that just because COVID-19 has hit us like a sledgehammer, that our business is doing well. And I wanted to say thank you, Douglas, because you've given me a couple of extra ideas to have a think about. So really, we've been hit very hard. We would normally work in sectors that are definitely relevant to this moment. We've got, for example, cleaning and hygiene products. We focus on probiotics, though, rather than on disinfectant.
Okay. I saw that on your website, yeah.
Yeah, everyone is absolutely fixated with disinfecting everything that sits still long enough at the moment. And our PPE, which is absolutely wonderful, is reusable, not disposable. So getting people's mind thinks around the fact that you don't have to throw everything in the bin is also a challenge. So I would say that we got some practice last year after 10 years with our multinational partner, and actually tripling the team and tripling the business. We had to give the business back to them. So we started from scratch again last January with no pre-existing business in the new sectors that we picked up, basically. So we had a whole year last year of practicing how to change our minds and how to get through a grief process, how to try and move forward. But again, this has hit us because it's different. So I think the biggest thing is being adaptable. Can you just take a few minutes as a business to sit, assess the situation, work out the impact that it's having on you, and then turn and do something about the things that you can change and that you can actually influence. And I think our business model has helped us in that respect.
Right, and how do you see the healthcare sector? I know that Fred, who's coming on after you, they play very heavily, Enterprise Ireland, in the healthcare sector. What would be your view on the future, the short and long term view, and obviously for the business, Amanda, what do you think is happening?
There's a very definitive split in terms of private and public, Mark. We are a predominantly public sector business. We have been for many years, and I think that's coming from the UK and having a national health service. When I arrived in South Africa, it was very much, what are we going to do for the public sector? Because for me, it didn't seem to make very much sense for everything to be focused on 10% of the population in terms of the business. But I think we've always implemented from the beginning a very forward-thinking attitude, and also to think of the way that we've crafted the business, its attitude and its approach to be protective, primarily of the employees. So we're in the process of formally adopting John Lewis's partnership model from the UK. And for those of you who know the model and have heard about it, it was originally set up to actually be very employee focused, particularly in terms of their satisfaction at work, and thinking that if you can take care of employee satisfaction, you can deliver better service to customers. It was also fairness and reconciliation based as well, and if you think about it, South Africa hasn't really tackled the notion of reconciliation and fairness head on.
Maybe not yet, yeah.
Not
and Amanda,
yet.
has that, does that then help you with things like your BE status? Getting into the public sector must be a challenge, especially in healthcare, because there's so many other providers. Your thoughts on that?
We've actually managed 10 years with a business predominantly public sector, Mark, without claiming a single BE point in all of those 10 years. That doesn't mean that we've not transformed. What we've actually done is made very big strides in terms of our transformation. We've got an awards wall with trophies and certificates that I'm quietly proud of. But in that time, we've managed to actually transform the business and never claim a single triple BE point. And the reason we did that was not that we don't believe in the principles of transformation, but that we made a promise to the team at the very beginning when we set up Umsinsi that we wouldn't differentiate between them on the basis of things they couldn't change about themselves. And that's very much the John Lewis way, basically, that every individual in a business counts, and your mission as a business is to find the thing that each person is best at, and actually get them working in that direction and get them focused on what they're doing. So what we did was we took more the business equality concepts into mind. So we stated very early on that we wanted a business that looked like the country at all levels effectively, and that it was our job to find awesome people in South Africa that reflected South Africa as a whole. And what we managed to do in a very, very short time frame was achieve transformation because we wanted to do it rather than out of the necessity of ticking a checkbox.
Meet the requirements,
So what we've done is in every tender we've submitted for, we've politely put a line through the triple BE pages, but we've submitted a second part to the submission that actually says, this is who we are as a business, this is our values, this is what we stand for, these are our results in terms of our equality, in terms of our women initiatives, in terms of our age initiatives, but that proviso all the time that we have made a promise to the team, and that we want to uphold our promise, basically, is that we will base any evaluation we have on them in terms of things they can influence and change about themselves, rather than things that they can't change about themselves.
Yeah.
So the model's currently sitting with Treasury and the Presidency and SARS. There is a provision for John Lewis's partnership model in the UK. The 2014 Finance Act made provision for it and made several quite radical changes, that you could either give 51% up to 100% of your company to your employees in trust for them, which takes away their debt obligations, and that you wouldn't be charged capital gains tax and you wouldn't be charged inheritance tax for doing that. It also has a public sector equivalent. So in the UK, there are things called public service mutuals, and they follow the John Lewis model, which is a trust structure for the ownership, which means that people don't own the business, the trust owns the business. And the mandate of the trust is to beneficiate the every single employee equally in terms of how they benefit as an owner, not only in terms of the benefits of ownership, the profit, but also in terms of the responsibilities, the accountability as well. So we're waiting for Treasury and SARS and the Presidency to give us the go-ahead. At the moment, they're just annoyed I'm not selling it and that I was going to give it to the employees. So they decided they wanted to charge me donations tax instead of capital gains tax.
Yes, there's as Douglas will attest, taxes are inevitable. Amanda, a couple of quick ones, if I may. I've got one bigger question, but we've had two questions flash on the screen. One, you may not be able to give an input, but the question from Frank is about whether and how some of the businesses that you know, your suppliers, small businesses, and Doug, you might also have a comment, are faring with the UIF issue. You may not be able to answer that because you're going full out. And then the second question from Herman was whether you were reliant a lot on imports or whether you're manufacturing.
We're currently very dependent on imports, and I've had this discussion with the DIT for the UK. We'd already said this last year before COVID and coronavirus hit, that what we wanted to see was a change in attitude. So we are very happy to do business with overseas companies in the health sector, but we'd really like to encourage them to please consider the nature and the tone of that relationship and turn it more into a partnership. For example, if you look at the South African healthcare sector, there's a lot more we could do to encourage, and this would include Irish companies as well, to actually come and share intellectual property and share technology and be able to set up at least initiatives that start looking at packaging here in South Africa that could move to part of manufacture. For example, we look at wound care, and I'm currently shipping fresh air, Mark, from the UK to South Africa. Every single wound care box that I open is 2/3 to 3/4 full of fresh air, and a third. Okay. Do you know what I mean? So of every cubic meter that I'm shipping, most of it is British fresh air from Winsford up in Cheshire. So what can we do? And also as well, there are health needs in South Africa that aren't met in Europe. There really aren't. If I look for things like, example, burns. Burns are our predominant wound type in South Africa. We even have a season for it. I don't need a 10x10 dressing. I need a body size dressing. If that makes sense. And what we've got over at that end of the planet in the north is the know-how and the technology and the capability. What we need is for it to migrate together with the willingness down to South Africa, and South Africa could become a fabulous hub for supplying the rest of not just our region, but going out to the east and the west from here as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks very much. And just very quickly, just to come back, I'm guessing you're not in a position to respond to that UIF question, eh?
Not yet. Look, we've taken a look at it. We've chosen at this point to keep the whole team on full employment, so they are all. It's part of the commitment in terms of the business model. And then when we're looking at our small suppliers, for example, in terms of cleaning services and anyone who's helping us with the smaller aspects of our role, even though, for example, our cleaning services are not present in the office, we're paying them anyway. So
yeah,
we've kept up with pretty much everything.
Okay.
And your very early question in terms of how long can you last, we actually did this objective with the whole team at our April Lakotla, which was the first big team meeting on Zoom. And we asked every team member how long did they think we could last under this situation. So I would also recommend that you include the team in that as well, because it's a process that every employee has to get into their head. You know, number one, how long can we last? Number two, what have we got to change in order to adapt and move forward?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Amanda. That's very insightful. Thank you very much. Please hold on the line. I'd like to bring our last panelist, Fred Klinkenberg. Welcome, Fred. Fred and I know each other personally. Fred is the country manager and director of Enterprise Ireland, based in South Africa, but he's got a remit for the rest of Africa. Welcome, Fred. Fred has an unusual story. I'll let him do the talking, but he is a COVID-19 survivor. So, Fred, we wanted to chat with you about two things. One is tell us a little bit about Enterprise Ireland, what you're doing and how you're coping. And then maybe you could start off by sharing with the people on the webinar your journey, of your personal experience with the virus.
Thanks, Mark, and everybody. Welcome to our story, if you like. I must congratulate Mark with a unique achievement over the last 30 minutes. He has managed to mute me for 30 minutes, which I think is a unicum, Mark, and congratulations.
Wasn't me, Fred.
It won't happen too often. And yes, indeed, I have recovered from the virus. And just to perhaps put some positive note into this discussion also, I must say that the medical treatment that I received in this country, in South Africa, has been phenomenal. And I would say without the staff and the doctors and all the rest of it in Mill Park, things might have been different. So I wanted to leave that as a positive note. I also wanted to come back to Amanda's comment in terms of local manufacturing here, and that's really important. And one of the things when we look at the opportunity that the coronavirus might bring is that we are looking at the medical device sector, which is, by the way, a 95% import market into Africa. And it is a stated objective of the DTI, etc., to bring more manufacturing to this country, rightly so, I think. Ireland is the third largest exporter of medical devices in Europe, believe it or not. And we think we have companies that, Amanda talked about packaging. You might even take it a step further where you talk about assembly, etc. There's something that there is an opportunity in that space that we want to look at. We also have just produced a brochure of Ireland's capability in the coronavirus sector. And we're going to throw that into the market here, and we think there are opportunities. So I think, again, that is, if you like, a positive story. And the final positive story is that we just got our figures for 2019, and in the education space, Africa was the fastest growing market globally, or region, if you like, globally, that we have, which is interesting. These are African kids that go to Ireland for undergraduate and postgraduate studies. So, so I think there are, in all the doom and gloom, if you like, some positiveness there. But certainly, from our perspective, the pandemic is the biggest challenge that we face in our lifetime, I suspect. It's affecting everything, every corner of the world, and it's unprecedented. And to put that in perspective, to put perhaps an international tone to it, Ireland came out of a a self-inflicted, a lot of people argue, financial meltdown in 2007, where we nearly went bankrupt as a country. Lots of was thrown in by the World Bank and the ECB, etc. And we recovered to the extent that unemployment went down from 16% to about 4.5, which is full employment. We had a surplus on our government budget. Ireland itself was in a very good position. Today, the 100,000 odd people that we had unemployed have risen to 1.2 million people. We run a budget deficit of over 10% today, and God knows where it will end up. And we have a contracting economy. So there's lots of challenges in other parts of the world. It's affecting everyone, if you like, at the end of the day. So if there is some solace in that, then perhaps that's good. I don't know whether everybody knows who we are, but we are the main development board in Ireland. We employ about 700 people. We have 5,000 Irish companies as our client. They export close to 30 billion euros. You multiply that by 20 today. When I started here, you would have multiplied that by 8. So that shows you where the rand has gone over the last 8 or 9 years. And we are in Africa because we believe in the opportunity Africa, and it's not going to be easy. But we believe that even after the virus, Africa will continue to move in the right direction. So we've built up a structure of 3 offices, Joburg, Nigeria, and Kenya for East Africa. And through those 3 offices and platforms there, we provide hopefully relevant advice to our client companies. And really, our advice to our clients is stay in touch with the market. Don't go away. Even in the difficult times, ring your buyer, ring your contact, ring your distributor, ring your partner, get to know him, keep talking to him. And it's really important that you do that. We play an active role in that ourselves, where we provide these in-depth customer engagements, and we do virtual itineraries. I've learned a lot about the different platforms, and I'm technically challenged most of the time. But yesterday I was on Google Hangout. I've never heard of that one, but I couldn't get on actually, but I was supposed to be on it, but we went back to Zoom. We do webinars, of course, like this, and we have a lot of one-to-one advice. So our advice to clients is take some time out from crisis management, if you can, and work with the people that you know, the contacts that you have in the market. Get to really know them. You're doing that in an environment where people are available. Do you know that you normally had to send an email sort of saying, Amanda, can I ring you on Monday 9 o'clock? And you would say, no, I'm not available, but Tuesday 10 o'clock would be fine. And I would be saying, no, I can't do that. And for me, I would be exhausted by the time we can actually talk. That day is different. Today we can actually pick up the phone, and people on the other side tend to be there, and they tend to want to talk actually, because we're all locked up. So to talk for half an hour or so. So this is a really good time, we say to our clients, to really understand the market environment, understand your contacts, and also learn where that market may be going to. In other words, do market research, see where the future opportunity may be in the market. So that's some of the advice that we give, and it's some of the background through which we come. And we really, as a country, we are the second most open economy in the world, Ireland is, after Singapore. We need to export. If we want to create wealth and employment and a good country for our people, we need to export. So we need to have a clear vision in terms of where we are today, what we need to do, and move forward into the future. When the opportunity, and no doubt guys, this will be over at some point. It will be over when we, well, I have great belief in the medical profession that we will actually invent a virus, and that's a vaccine, some anyhow, to do a vaccine. And I think that will then allow us to go back to some form of normality. But I would also make the point that I don't think the world that we left is going to be the world that we're going to see in the future. I think that certainly travel will change thanks to these type of platforms that we use here, like Zoom, etc., etc. I also think that perhaps the expectation of offices will change. So to be growth point today, I think I'll get worried, because we probably don't need all these offices anymore and anybody in the property game. So I think it'd be a changed world. So we're saying, keep talking, keep solidifying what you have, but also try to look at the future, what you should be doing.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that a lot. I love from all three of the speakers, the upbeat, you know, the can-do approach. Fred, two quick questions. One is specific. You may not have seen it come across your screen, from John. John wants to know, do you still expect education technology, to grow at the same rate or faster than it has at the moment?
I'm not sure what he means by education technology. Is that the vocational training? Is that the training to develop craftsmen, etc.?
Yeah, it's probably, Fred, I'm guessing now, so John can respond, but it's, there we go, training and online platforms, Fred. So platforms like this one, for example.
Yeah, I think, John, I can only concur with that. We see education, if you take a step back from the question, hopefully I'll answer it that way. We see education as a big growth potential, probably the single biggest opportunity we have in Africa. And if you strip that down, we see it, as I said earlier, in the area of third level education, to try to receive students from abroad, from Africa, for postgraduate studies, and then send hopefully little ambassadors on Ireland back to Africa, who then want to do business with us. We see that very much. We see a huge opportunity, even bigger than the first sector, in the vocational technology change. I think that Africa will not succeed economically if it doesn't address the education problem that it has, the deficiency that it has.
Can I add something to that one?
Yeah.
I would strongly speculate that EdTech is going to grow, and in big ways. In fact, it makes up the final chapter of my book. We try to keep the sort of the philosophy and the waffle to an absolute minimum, and just to provide solutions. But the final chapter, I indulge in a little bit of prognostication and ask, what might the world look like tomorrow? And the one thing that I had a go at, funny enough, is the concept of the university, in which I say it is a massively important institution. What it does for civilization is incredibly important, but in places like the States, since 1975, the cost has gone up something like 4,000-fold. And you couple this with people discovering that you are able to open a business, get employed, function in the world without advanced university degrees, and an alarming trend toward teaching Marxism in universities, which I have a big issue with personally. And as a paying parent, I'm going, well, on the one side, I'm seeing a very low return of value. On the other hand, I'm seeing a high amount of indoctrination, and you're not necessarily teaching my children what they need to know to function in the world. I think that institution is in for a shock and a wake-up call.
Thank you, Douglas.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just to finish that, perhaps also, because I still believe that the vocational space is an enormous growth area, that we need to be better in Africa in teaching people so that we can attract foreign direct investment at the end of the day. But we see a trend, actually, even before the virus, that a lot of the offerings were blended offerings, where you would see classroom and online becoming the predominant factor. So, and I agree that is only something that will continue and grow as we change our habits, as we change our travel habits, etc. So, yeah, it's a growth industry, if that answers John's question.
Follow-on question, Fred. You've touched on some, and when Amanda was speaking, you connected in terms of the healthcare. What are Irish companies, the companies that are represented here as opposed to globally, What are the Irish companies seeing as being the opportunities, tying back to Doug's earlier comments? But what are you seeing as the opportunities? And then the other side of that coin, Fred, what are you seeing as the problem children? You mentioned Growth Point, and that probably wasn't tongue-in-cheek, for example. Would you want to invest in offices today? What are the Irish companies that you deal with seeing as the big opportunities?
Well, we see certainly the opportunity in Africa, and that includes, of course, South Africa, to be in the digital space, digital technology. We also believe that that will be, if you like, the horse that will carry us all and pull us out of the recession. We think that that's going to be the first growth engine, if you like, or one of the first growth engines, perhaps. But digital technology, certainly artificial intelligence, telecommunications, cyber space, cyber risk awareness, etc. So that's a sector that we focus on, and my colleague Nicola is working hard on that. We see agriculture as a big growth area. Africa has a stated objective that it wants to become self-sufficient in agriculture. It doesn't have the money, the foreign exchange, to basically buy food in, so it has to produce it itself. It has all the people, all the labor, and all the land to do so. So we are seeing that as an opportunity to come in with technology and knowledge. We are sticking the Irish spud in the ground in Kenya somewhere, and it is genetically modified. And the yield per hectare has gone from 12 tons to 63 tons. And that's all about security, food security, etc. So we see that as an opportunity. We see the growth in healthcare as an opportunity, and we have a strong offering in that. So we have education, as I just mentioned. So we have about a half a dozen opportunity areas identified that we think we can actually play in by offering knowledge and offering services and products that will make the local business more competitive, and it allows the local business, the local partner, to grow, if you like, so that we can create a win-win for ourselves and locally here. So we do have a focus in terms of a number of, on the downside, Africa is a tough place to do business. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for the first-time exporters. So we tend to get the guys who have gone through the mills of Europe and North America and the UK, if you like. So the guys who are committed, they know they're the wintered exporters. But it takes time, guys. And that's not always there, because most SMEs would have limited, as in South Africa, limited resources in terms of people, in terms of money. So it's very hard for an entrepreneur to say, we go to South Africa and it takes me 2 years to develop that market. And that's where we try to come in also to by the provision of knowledge and information and being in the market here to shorten that cycle. But it's a tough one. And then payment is sometimes an issue, particularly we find, and Amanda, I congratulate you by being government focused. We tend to be focused on the private sector. We think that's less difficult than the government, if you like, at the end of the day. So most of our trade, which today is worth about 400 million euros, is done in the private sector as opposed to the public sector. So Africa definitely has its chores, but then I would argue, tell me a country where exporting is easy to.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Amanda. We, as promised to the participants, we have an opportunity now for you to address questions directly to the delegates. And while you're doing that, I will try to manage that for the next 12 or 13 minutes or so. I'd like to go back, Douglas, as promised, and then Amanda, just to, were there any linking comments that you'd like to make? You were able to jump in there on Fred. Is there any other comments that you thought, because you were up first, you've got to hear some of the others now?
Absolutely. And just linking into something Fred mentioned about keeping in touch with our customers, there is a very radical but actually quite simple technique you can use if you are looking for creative ways to restructure your business to interact with the market in different ways. And it is as simple as this. Ask, what do your customers need right now? Not, what did I previously supply them with? And that can be an entirely different conversation. And it does entail that you actually pull up your sleeves, make the phone call, go there if you can, and ask the question, what do you need right now? Or what do your customers downstream need right now? And the genius of that simple technique is that you end up serving the same market, serving the same people, but with what they actually need if you're able to make that pivot. So everyone's talking about clever pivots and different ways of offering value. That's one of the simplest, one of the most radical, and one of the most strategically clever.
Yeah. And there used to be, Doug, I don't know if it's still the same, but there used to be that statement that said that it's 7 times easier to keep an existing customer than it is to get a new one. I don't know if that old adage is still around, but I do think working with you, because they know you, they like working with you, we hope, and hopefully, as Fred says, they're paying you. So that's a key issue. Thanks, Doug. I'll come back again. Amanda, you've been quite quiet. You moved in there, and then you went to tell us a little bit about the getting paid from the public sector, things like that. I'm sure that's a big challenge for you.
Look, it is a challenge, but equally what I would do, I would say to everyone, I'd encourage them to look sideways, because I think it's very typical. We would say that predominantly we belong to SAMED, which is the Medical Devices Industry Association in South Africa. And I would say we're virtually only the one, or there's maybe 2 of us at most, that have a predominantly public sector business versus a private sector business. So our 75-25 split is typically the other way around for the vast majority of industry members. What I would say is we rationalized it by saying it was the difference between swimming with the piranhas and swimming with the sharks, if that makes sense. There's no blue water. Well, there might be a pocket of blue water until the shark comes along. So we basically symbolize the private sector as swimming with the piranhas, which means you're in a tank of a completely different kind. It's overcrowded. They have a tendency of nibbling, and before you know it, you're down to the bone, basically, in terms of your value and your cost effectiveness. And then obviously the public sector is the shark. So you might lose a limb one day, but thankfully you don't lose all 4 on the same day, if that makes sense. The Mpumalanga shark might come and take a right leg one month, and then the Northwest will come and take your left arm. But thankfully, in 10 years, they've never actually taken all of them together. This is cash flow management. So what we, at the end of the day, tend to do is look at the payment of the immediate bills and the basics on the private sector. And then we use the income from the public sector to grow and develop, if that makes sense. So our immediate needs are the private sector income, our growth and development needs are the public. And that was how we balanced it. So I would encourage people to look sideways, and I'd encourage them to also have a strategy for the public sector when it comes to Africa, because the vast majority of Africa is public, it's not private. You know, by the time you add up the private sector, it's a single digit and it's a small one. So what is your strategy for Africa, and let it be public in terms of saying how are you going to serve the continent, how are you going to serve the country in terms of your business, and innovation focused as well. I think, Mark, we've got too many cheap versions of the same thing already in South Africa. What we're really looking for is innovation that moves healthcare forward, but that also serves as many of the country as possible, so that we can have what we hope to have is a functioning and a passionate national health service at some point in the future. So I think there's huge scope for that, for being innovative. The minute you start bringing in cheaper copies of the same thing, you're straight back to the piranha tank. It's not giving you any opportunity at all. So the opportunity lies in innovation, and actually finding ways of putting innovation forward in a very obvious way for the end user, so that they can immediately see the value for money for as many people as possible.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. Nice. Maybe a last one to you, and we'll do one other, but just the last one. How are you managing your staff under these circumstances? Are you working remotely with them? It was a question I meant to ask Fred as well, because I know he's also working remotely.
We've got cover at the office, so each day we've got 2 support team members in, and then the leadership team rotates. So while it's been level 5, it's been 2 support team members plus 1 leadership team member. From Monday, it's going to be 2 leadership team members. So it means we work 2 days a week in the office. I'm very fortunate. I live 800 meters away from where I work, so we're right by nature, the nature reserve at Modderfontein. I live in Founders Hill Village. I've only got an 800-meter walk through the trees to get to the office. But the sales team have actually been predominantly at home, and they've really found it tough because they're very much used to getting in there with their customers in the hospitals. A couple of them have ventured in the last week for specific reasons. We've been invited in by public hospitals, not private. And the message we've been given is that actually we're very much missed, and they really want to see us back again as quickly as possible in terms of supporting them. And I think that's because we don't just bring them good products, we bring them a fabulous service. So they're missing the service, if that makes sense, in terms of the education, the training that goes with the products. So the team are chomping at the bit. We get lovely pictures of them all garbed up in their PPE, their masks, their everything. Yeah. It's all we're missing is the all-in-one hazmat suits, but we don't want to frighten the customers.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. And Fred, if I may, just as a closing, I've had a question from a offline attendee. I'm not sure how you do that, but an offline attendee. Companies that you deal with from Ireland, how are they on levels of business agility? The question is around agile business under these difficult circumstances, Fred. Any thoughts on that? Would you see yourselves as an agile organization?
Well, just to go back perhaps to the home working and question, we work from home. The entire organization globally works from home, bar essential services in headquarters that need to be there. We were actually quite apprehensive about doing that as an organization. You know, that in the stereotype management structures, you need to see your people to be in control of your people type of thing, to see their outputs and to see what they do. And yet the experience is different to what we see today, not only in South Africa, but around the world, is that people are living up to the expectation. And they go very often beyond the expectation, actually, in terms of their performance, in terms of what they achieve, provided they have clear objectives and clear strategy that needs to be followed in terms of what needs to be done. So I think moving forward again, working from home will become a more integral feature of what we're trying to do into the future of doing that. I have no doubt about that. I think, and hence we don't need the same offices, etc. Okay. Sorry, I had a question about companies here.
Yes. Fred. Well, I think you addressed it earlier on. It was the one about the ones that were the opportunities and organizations that weren't doing as well. So I think you've addressed that. I'm just going to see. I'm just looking at my. There were a number of questions. Sorry, Fred. Go ahead, please. Just wanted to make sure that. So I've had a question from Willie Cross. Willie, are you able to? Is David able to? I've always wanted to say this, guys. My executive producer is managing this for us. But before we close, any? No.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Fred. Okay, ladies and gents, is there a... David, have you got a call for me, or I can...
Hello, William, have we got you, William?
Yes, David.
David, it was just a question for Fred there, really. You know, we've often mentioned that Ireland is probably the #1 pharmaceutical exporter in the world. And on that basis, I was just wondering if Fred had any idea how the development of a vaccine is actually going in Ireland at this point in time.
If I knew really which company I need to put the money in, I would buy the shares today. I should have bought some Zoom shares 2 months ago, and I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. There are a number of initiatives taken by individuals, universities, and some of the companies that manufacture in Ireland and do some of their R&D in Ireland. We currently have, I think it's 9 out of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies are in Ireland with substantial presences. So there is a lot happening there. There are various reports really in the papers of companies that are going from or are currently in animal trials, if you like, and hopefully if that goes well, they may go on again. But I think the general wisdom is that it's not there yet. And I think that's probably on the global side. And I think that it will take some time before that happens. And in that light, you need to look at the restrictions that placed upon us, the lockdown, and to what extent that can actually be relaxed in a responsible manner. And what the South African government has done, I think, is fairly unique in the world, actually, and I admire them for that in terms of coming out with this phased approach, like the 1 to 5. And I haven't seen that anywhere else in Europe being done. That's hopefully that's an okay, thank you. I had some message coming in.
Ladies and gents, with Fred's better half popping in there, it's a good time to draw.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just say that that was my wife, my current secretary. Oh, she's going to kill me. But, she did say to me, and I forgot to thank everybody that sent me lots of messages in hospital, etc., and the support. Guys, I really appreciate that. The WhatsApp messages were just phenomenal and fantastic. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
All right. Ladies and gents, to Douglas, to Amanda, to Fred, to all of you for taking the time to be with us on this 3rd of 3 COVID-19 webinars. Thank you for your attendance. We bring you best wishes from people like Arthur Goldstruck, Ted O'Muraku, Lorraine Keenan, Tony Georgian, all the panelists. There are many, many messages of support for all of us. To thank you for your time, energy, and effort. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the experience. And to say, Céad Míle Fáilte. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you.